Welcome, Dracuphiles, to Sundays with Dracula. Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will. This is chapter 19 of Sundays with Dracula. I am Edward G. Pettit of The Rosenbach in Philadelphia, the home of Bram Stoker's Notes for Dracula. Over 100 pages of outlines, early plot ideas, and research notes compiled by the author over the 7 years he developed and wrote the book. It is an extraordinary record of the conception and development of a novel. We will look at a couple of those pages today. And joining me as co-host is horror theater maker, and I'm trying to think about the title for ghost story archivist, maybe?
I like it.
Josh Hitchens. Hey, Josh.
Hi, Ed. It's great to be back. Good to see everybody.
All righty. You're going sans headphones today. I know you're usually on the headphones.
Sometimes, yeah.
All righty. Well, I can't wait to talk about this chapter with you today because, everyone, that is what we do here on Sundays with Dracula. We illuminate, unravel, disentangle Bram Stoker's novel about bloodsuckers in the 1890s, one chapter at a time for 27 weeks. Co-hosts join me each week to create a kind of conversational annotation of the novel. And Bram Stoker's Notes for Dracula are just one of the many gems of the Rosenbach's collections. You can go online and see some of our collections guides, as well as gallery gateways of past exhibitions and other virtual programs and courses we are creating. I want to share a couple courses with you right now before we get underway today. There we go. If you just go into programs, you hit virtual courses, you'll come up to this page. Look at this, Read the Blood of Dracula, Vampire Folklore, which you can sign up for these classes individually that I'm doing. And if you click on this one, oh, look, it's sold out. That's because it is filled. There are 25 people in it. We have to cap it there. We can't have too many for the conversation. But the ones coming up, I know, still have a few spots in them. Next month, there is one about Byron and the vampire, and then in November is The Mysterious Stranger, and December is Carmilla. So there are a few spots in each of those, but we have some other courses coming up too, brand new. Look at this course, Poetry and Pandemic, New Readings of Chaucer. David Wallace is going to come and from the University of Pennsylvania, and we are going to read some Boccaccio from the Decameron first, and he'll talk about it. He'll teach us what this is all about, and then we'll do a couple of Chaucer's tales. This is a short course that only meets 3 times every 2 weeks, starting in October. It is already filling up. David Wallace came and did a Chaucer course for us last year, and it is not only so rewarding learning the Chaucer and what it's all about, and it's very funny too, but we all read the Middle English, and he has us all read the Middle English in class out loud too, and it is tremendously fun to do. So I highly recommend that. And there's another course starting in November called Stage to Screen: Great Films from Great Plays. It is taught by Philadelphia Inquirer theater critic Toby Zinman, and she's chosen 4 classic plays that are great in their own rights that also have films that were great attached to them. So it'll be really great. It's Long Day's Journey into Night, Cat in a Hot Tin Roof, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and For Color Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. So that'll be 4 times over 4 months starting in November. Very excited for that class as well. I want to sit in on that too, but
For real, yeah.
So so there's 2 new virtual courses posted. You can sign up for. You can sign up for mine, or if you just want to go on, there's a little support tab up there. You click on that and find out how to give to the Rosenbach. Any amount helps. Josh, I want to just see what's new with you, but if you notice today, my glass is empty. It just has some cherries in it here because I wanted to make my drink live on air today. So I'm going to do what are you drinking right now? Are you drinking anything today, Josh?
Just coffee and water for me.
Coffee and water. Okay.
Not as exciting.
Because last week I really wanted to have a drink called the Scholomance. But I couldn't, because in the chapter is all about the burnt rum punch. Like, I can't give up an opportunity when their drink is mentioned in the chapter to invent it. So I'm having the Scolamance this week, and what it is some Kraken spiced rum and some ginger beer. I have a can of it here. It's a little cold. Pour that in here. I already poured the Kraken in this cool Kraken tiki glass here, which I thought was very old god looking. So it really fits the Scolamance drink. And yeah, I think that's enough. That's how I measure things. Like, yeah, I think that's enough. Maybe too much. I don't know. I can always add more rum. But the special thing about this drink is, now I want to, trying to get my ice out here, because I have special ice for this drink. I bought this handy dandy mold that makes skull ice cubes. Can you see my skull ice cubes? Beautiful. So they're going to go in there. I think I'll do two. I think I'll do 3 skulls. This is a 3 skull drink. Those back in the ice. The skull's probably going to melt away. And then I am going to take a little of my hearing cherry liqueur, and I could just drink this stuff like right out of the bottle. I mean, I'm a sweet tooth candy kind of guy anyway, so this is just delicious. And I like the way, you know, it'll just pour over the skulls.
Oh yes.
And there was a little maraschino cherry juice in there. For the maraschino cherries, I use these Luxardo, you know, fancy ones that have the very, very thick syrup in it, and they are absolutely delicious. And so I want to stir up my skulls and hearing a little bit. Skulls and cherries, all set. And now I'll put some of this in here. Whoops, you go back there. That would be hilarious if I knocked over a whole bottle of booze, right? So I think I'm going to add another skull. I think it needs one more skull. And I have one more skull. The second one I have of these today will have no skulls, because this little skull ice maker only makes 4. And there we have it. A very dark drink too, which I like, from the Kraken spiced rum. I have not yet tried this drink. I just figured, yeah, this will taste good. So let's see. And it tastes really good. I probably should have put a little less ginger beer in it. So I'm going to put a little more rum in after I drink about 1/3 of this. So there you go. With skulls and cherries, I don't even know if you can tell there's a skull in there, but with skulls and cherries, that is the Scolamance. So
love it.
All righty. Josh, what's new with you?
So I've mentioned before, but I am currently in the process of writing my first book for the History Press, tentatively called The Haunting of Delaware, Ghosts and Legends from the First State. And I've been having a lot of fun researching and writing that. And I sent what I had written to my editor a few weeks ago, and she got back to me yesterday, and she loves what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So I'm very, very excited about that. I've got 7 more chapters left to write before the first draft is done. But that's coming along well. And I'm also going to be teaching virtual class starting in October with Allen's Lane Art Center on creating solo performance.
Something you are great at. So and that is great for you to pass that knowledge on to people.
Yeah, like for those who don't know, like I've done a lot of written and adapted and performed a lot of at least 10 different solo plays over my career so far. So the course is designed with very limited class space. I limited it to 6 people, and it's an 8-week course. And over the course of that, I'll talk about different kinds of adaptation and how you do each of those. And students in the class will pick a project they want to work on, and over the course of 8 weeks, we'll work on writing and reading it out loud and performing it. So the goal is that at the end of the course, students will have a piece of their own that they've created and ready to take out into the world. So I'm excited. I'm excited to do that. I've never taught creating solo performance before, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good time.
Excellent. Do you have a link for that? Can you try to throw a link for that in the chat today if you have a chance? If not, just send it to me, and we can wind up posting it on the Facebook group too.
Yeah, the webs I'll do that. But the website is allenslane.org for Allens Lane Art Center. It's in their virtual theater class section, but I'll make sure to pop a link up.
Have you done that before? Taught a virtual class?
Probably. I haven't. It's gonna be new. I mean, this has been good practice for, figuring out how to do this stuff during this time. But I'm excited.
Good. And opportunities that weren't going to come up otherwise for a lot of people to do this virtual thing, and also to grab some audience, maybe some actors who aren't necessarily in the Philadelphia area that you can teach. So that's really exciting. All righty, and the book's coming along well. I'm happy to hear that, everyone. Josh has a Patreon account too. I sent Steve the link to put there in the chat today. So support Josh, support artists, support the Rosenbach, support people who who really need as well. Here I am asking for money for the arts when I know there are people out there who, are living in dire conditions because of the pandemic, and absolutely please support those. But if you have any extra for the arts, hey, we are here and we are trying to bring some joy to your lives with our programs and courses and all kinds of things. So, and books that you're writing. So, all righty. I could get on the Harlan Ellison thing, pay the writer, right. So, but I have a couple revenants today before we hit the chapter. And the first one is just about when I hit the moment in the chapter last week in chapter 18, when Harker says, hey, I'll come and see Renfield too, and then he's not in the rest of the scene, it didn't dawn on me that that's in a lot of texts that his line isn't even there. It depends on what the book of Dracula that you're reading. It depends on whether they took it from the British or the American edition. And the American text says, hey, Jonathan says, me too. He wants to come along to see Renfield. And it's just a very short little line in there. And in the British text, it's not there at all. And that makes sense, because then later when they all go down to meet Renfield, Dr. Seward introduces everybody, doesn't introduce Jonathan. Everybody says, Renfield says something about everyone, doesn't say anything about Jonathan. So it's clear in the scene that he's kind of not there. So I wonder if it was a last-minute insertion for Stoker's that just made it into the text that was for the American publication, which is 1899. The British is 1897. But that brings up a curious moment, too, because also only in the American, as you well know, Josh, and not in the British, is the "tonight is mine" line that Dracula utters about Jonathan when just before the last day, I think it is, when the brides are waiting, like, can we eat him now? Can we eat him now, please? And Dracula has to say, no, tonight is mine, tomorrow is yours. And the British edition just says tomorrow is yours. Doesn't say tonight is mine, but it's in the American text. So the debate is always, was that a line perhaps censored from the British text because they thought it was a little too risque for this male vampire to be saying tonight is mine about Jonathan, even though he's already said this man belongs to me to them in a previous scene. Well, this I think complicates it, because I wonder now if, and I don't think there's a way of discovering this. This is something I'm going to talk to some researchers about. Is there a way to know, does the type script that they used for to set the American editions in type, obviously it must contain both of those lines, and I'm pretty certain the British one is gone, or they use the the typescript that is in the collection in Seattle. Maybe they're just 2 lines that were added afterwards now for the next American edition is something that I'm leaning towards figuring out if that is the case. That would be fascinating to know that Stoker then decided he was going to add Tonight Is Mine, and then also think, oh, I shouldn't include Jonathan in this scene, because then in the next chapter, the chapter we're doing today, he mentions how he was with them, with Renfield. So like there's this odd thing going on in the text, and it looks like a mistake, but it certainly wasn't a mistake in the original text in that he's not included in that scene with Ramp. So it's a little complicated, but I think it has bigger ramifications to know that both of these lines were not in the British text, but they're in the American text. So that makes me wonder if it's an entirely different typescript that was used that had those 2 lines added. So
yeah, and it's an interesting question of like if there was censorship going on, like as you said, like who was doing it? Was it a publisher like for the British, like, oh, that's too much, or was it Stoker leaving that out and then getting brave enough to put it in later?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it's possible to know that, but it's fascinating to think about.
It'll never be possible to know it unless you find a written reference where he says so, and he's so reticent in those kind of personal revelations about himself that it's pretty unlikely that we'll ever come across that. So
yeah.
Well, that's one Revenant I wanted to hit today. And the second is to address this question from Adam, which in our audience, which he sent me last week, and I didn't get to do during the show. We kind of addressed some of it because it's about when Renfield first meets Mina and how he addresses her. But I kind of only addressed the how she was treating Renfield and Seward and how that made a difference. But Adam's question is, I'm specifically wondering about Renfield. He seems surprised to see Wilhelmina and not Lucy when she visited him. Then he said about Lucy, she's dead. Did he already know that beforehand, or was he quick-witted enough to surmise that from Mina's appearance? I mean, the exact line is, this look gave way to one of wonder on Renfield's face, which merged in doubt. Then, to my intense astonishment, this is Mina's astonishment, he said, "You're not the girl the doctor wanted to marry, are you? You can't be, you know, for she's dead." So why is he surprised? First of all, did he expect Lucy? He knows she's dead. Why would he expect? Like, it's a little bit confusing. But then Adam goes on and he says, did he know that she was going to be the master's next victim? This is Mina, and treated her well for that? Or was the realization of Lucy's death and the impending victimhood of Mina the inspiration for his changing from the master's slave to expressing his own will and goodness? It was on the next day that he begged to be set free. So, well, first, I think he's nice to Mina, as I said last week, because she comes in and treats him with respect, and something that Seward never does. But this whole surprise thing is really an odd detail because, yeah, if he knows that Lucy is dead, then why is he surprised? It's a very odd little detail in here that I haven't really been able to make much of, except the fact that Renfield knows something about everyone in the novel before he meets them. And at the very least, the easiest thing I can say about that is that Stoker seems to be intentionally trying to create this mysterious supernatural effect that Renfield knows things that he's not supposed to know. So it's not even necessarily, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the psychic connection with Dracula. It could just be this effect that that Renfield seems to know things about people. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element to it that Renfield has some sort of connection or an extra sense about all these people, perhaps, you know, partly because of his connection with Dracula, but perhaps also something he possesses naturally or has come to possess during his time in the asylum. And yeah, I think that quick, you know, change of emotions when he first sees Mina is really interesting, and how he processes that. And I think there's something in it about Mina herself. Like, I think she is when she comes into the asylum, I think she is such a strong, good presence that really affects him. Like, Renfield's very taken by her, like almost like he speaks to her almost like he's a man courting her, like besotted with her. And she's so kind to him, and so they have that dialogue. I don't know if it's that he knows that she's going to be Dracula's next victim. I think it probably crosses his mind because she is the other woman that's in this sphere of people that's trying to close in on Dracula. But I think there's something about her that really pulls him. And I think, as it goes on later, there's a big part of Renfield who does not want Mina to be harmed, that wants to save her from him in a way too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating moment, and I think you're right that it does intentionally create this sort of mysterious effect of like what is going on here, what does he know, what's the plan going forward with Dracula.
There's a moment in the notes, and oh, here it's actually in that Historiae Personae
Mm.
uh, list of characters that Stoker, but the one that he writes Dracula all over. Let me bring that up because there's just one tiny little detail in it that really makes a lot of sense for Renfield. And here it is. I'm trying to share it. I think my computer is working a little slowly today. Let's hope this works out. This is this Historiae Personae page. And notice how Mad Patient, who is Renfield, Theory of Getting Life, and then he has instinctively goes for count. And that, because we've had this question before about the connection between the two of them and how does, before the count's even there, Renfield is kind of psychically linked to him. And it's that word instinctively, that this is some instinctive part of Renfield, that he has this maybe psychic ability, maybe some kind of like his body is attuned to this evil presence that is approaching. But because it's instinctively, that's the word that Stoker uses. That's less about Dracula and more about Renfield himself having this within him. And maybe that's also how he knows everything about people too, that maybe he has some kind of instinctive psychic powers, inherent psychic powers maybe would be the better word for it, even though that's not the word that Stoker used. He used instinctive. Adam has this other note here too, and he followed this up with, he also read this theory in one essay that Renfield's knife attack on Seward in chapter 11 was specifically ordered by the master, that Dracula said, I want you to attack him. Because he writes, Adam writes, it was seemingly without apparent cause and seemed unconnected to the rest of the story. It was also not in line with his then current obsession, flies to spiders, to sparrows, to kittens. It makes sense, but jumping to humans was a pretty big leap. It might also explain some of his contempt for Seward, but it resulting in weakening Seward and indirectly led to Lucy being unguarded on the night of the Berserker attack. So I think we may even raise that point when we did that chapter, like if Renfield had not attacked him, would Seward have been okay and gone back that night? And they writes that would explain how Renfield knew about Lucy, as well as possibly his guilt on her death, either her first death or her real death, whatever. But he is trying to at least protect Mina over all of this. I don't think it's a big leap to go from kittens to humans, actually. I mean, it really is like he's going from because the logic is there. He's making a jump from one animal form to the next one up in the chain, the next one up in the chain. And I don't know, we're not that far from, cats and dogs, from pets. We're maybe the next step from
Yeah.
those animals.
And it's interesting. I never really thought about it before right now. But with that kind of progression, like as someone who has played Jeffrey Dahmer many times, like it is like almost like the sort of classic progression of a serial killer in a way that Renfield goes through. That starts with these, the fly, like just killing the flies and eating the flies, and then the birds and the kittens, and then going to people. Like that's classic like serial killer behavior. So that's kind of a fascinating thing to think about that never really entered my head before. Yeah.
Good stuff from Adam. So, I mean, I don't think there's any definitive answers for these, which makes them great questions, because we could, there's so much we could talk about them. And I'll never and I really don't understand that moment where Renfield is surprised at seeing her, and like, oh, you're not Lucy, she's dead. And well, yeah, did you expect Lucy? Maybe he expected risen Lucy to come in to see him. I don't know. It's just an odd moment for him, but it's also one of those moments that allows Stoker to demonstrate that Renfield knows things that he probably shouldn't know, and also that he's torn between his allegiance to the master and this young girl who's this young woman who has just come in, and he doesn't want to see her, destroyed by Dracula too. So he's got this conflict going in him that we'll really see play out over the next few chapters. Excellent. We have some special guests coming up, of course. Kim Newman, author of Anno Dracula, will be on the show September 27 for chapter 21. That's the chapter from which Anno Dracula diverges from Stoker's Dracula. So it'll be really exciting to have Kim on to talk about that chapter with us. He'll come on for the whole show, as we've had special guests do in the past. And I will talk at mid-break today about the Mark Gatiss program. If you did not see the email that I sent yesterday or have not been on our Facebook account, Mark Gatiss will be doing a special program with us on Saturday, September 26th. A lot of you already signed up for it. Thank you for that. But I'll talk a little more about that at the mid-break. And on tomorrow evening's Monday Drac Chat, my Dracuphile guest will be Patrick Stone. I'm pretty sure Patrick is in the audience today on the chat. Everybody, there he is. So Patrick will be joining me tomorrow night on Monday Drac Chat. Are we ready to talk about the chapter? Chapter 19.
Let's do it. There's some fun stuff in this one.
Awesome. Well, when last we met in chapter 18, the vampire hunting men, just the men, they all visited Renfield while Mina was sent to her room, literally. In the text, it says that. Renfield asks to leave. Renfield begs them for him to leave the asylum, and they say no, and Seward says no. But then he takes a parting shot at Seward, which is the last line of the chapter. You will, I trust, Dr. Seward, do me the justice to bear in mind later on that I did what I could to convince you tonight. So, because, that while they were there or just after that, Dracula's visiting Mina. So it may have even been before, it's right around then, and Renfield knows. And I think it must be after then, the way he's talking. But because the time is all messed up, because this is a weird thing here, that in the last chapter, we talked about this a little bit last week, the last chapter, that Seward's journal entry said 1 October, 4 a.m. And then that's when they go and visit Renfield. And now we're in Jonathan's journal for the start of this chapter, and it's October 1, 5 a.m. Well, all right, maybe they visited Renfield at 4 and then went and visited the house, and that'll make sense as we see later, because the sun's coming up when they leave. But Dracula's got a visit. And so is it in that time? And then there's also this lost time, because the night before Seward's journal entry, when they go visit Renfield, they have their meeting the lecture from Van Helsing. And I think they said it was supposed to start at 9, but then it winds up starting at 8, I think, or soon after dinner or something like that. And so that meeting can't take more than a couple hours, even if it's, what we get as a condensed version. So there's a few hours at night, several hours between when that meeting ended and when they went to visit Renfield. So it's enough time for Mina to go to bed and Dracula to prey upon her. But the way Renfield's talking, and I think there's a clue in this is to that it doesn't happen until after they meet with Renfield. It's odd. The time is, I wish that 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. weren't there, because it kind of makes a mess of trying to figuring out the order of these events. Not that should bother people so much, but there does seem to be a chunk of time in there that is unaccounted for, and maybe just in Stoker's mind that is the time when Dracula preys on Mina. I'm not sure. So, and if you're reading for the first time, I'm sorry for the spoilers, but the way we can't go and do it like a deep dive, annotate the novel without connecting it to things that are actually happening, even though we don't find out in the text until the next chapter. So, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add on that time thing, Josh. It doesn't seem to make sense to me, but
yeah, it's weird. And I think it's one of those things, like you said, that the first time you're reading the book, you don't register it probably. No. It's really only when you come back to it, when you notice these sort of weird things with time that happen throughout the book. Like we talked way back, like there's all this missing time during Jonathan's time in Dracula's castle, and like what's going on during that, that's never explained. So I think when like Stoker's plotting out this very, very intricate tapestry of people and places and times and making it all coalesce, and he does a tremendous job of it, but there's little odds and ends throughout the book that don't quite add up, which I think is very human too. It's a lot to keep track of, but when you dive deep down into it, it does make you think of like, oh, what's going on in this time period, which is part of the fun, I think.
Absolutely. So, well, this chapter then does open up with Jonathan is ironic, maybe, take on Mina, not being with them but being safe because of that. I went with the party not to the party. It's not a party. I went with the party to the search with an easy mind, for I think I never saw Mina so absolutely strong and well. I am so glad that she consented to hold back and let us men do the work. Somehow it was a dread to me that she was in this fearful business at all. But now that her work is done, and that is due to her energy and brains and foresight, that the whole story is put together in such a way that every point tells, she may well feel that her part is finished, and that she can henceforth leave the rest to us. I mean, I read that whole little bit there because he's really, he's relieved that his wife is not involved in this, but he very much acknowledges her, abilities in putting them kind of on the right path. And I think that there's a poll. We'll get that a little later in this, thing too, that there's a poll from Jonathan. Like he wants her to be included, but is kind of happy that she's not, which I totally understand. But it doesn't empower her.
Well, at the same time acknowledging that like she's done literally all the work to put all these pieces together, that this sort of pursuit that's happening now would not have happened without her work, but she doesn't get to take part in it anymore.
And the great irony here is he's like, oh, she's so safe, and guess what, she ain't safe right now. At this moment, she may not be safe. So that is what's going on. The men start talking about Renfield. Quincy believes he has some serious purpose. And then Van Helsing, sorry, it's just really funny. Van Helsing says, "Friend John, you know more of lunatics than I do." And my notes. Hey, I'm going to share my notes real briefly with people here. This is what my notes actually say about this. Where's my share? Here it is. Boom, share. There you go. Can you read that? You know more than ha ha. That's all I wrote was ha ha ha's all the way across there. So then VH Van Helsing must know absolutely nothing. That like I can't. I've never encountered an asylum doctor who knew less about lunatics than Seward. Yeah. But I don't know if that is what we're supposed to gather from this. There's also a little thing taken out of this passage just before that is in the typescript that was then cut. There's a reference to Henry Irving, just as in a few chapters ago there was a reference to like the chapters over there, right? There was a reference to Ellen Terry. He had a line in here about and it was from Quincy about Renfield seeming sane, and he says and if he isn't, he's about fit to call Irving for the jackpot. That he's kind of a better, like if he's really nuts, then he's a better actor than Henry Irving. It's funny that and there's another reference to Irving in the novel too that he also cut out, but that exists in the typescript. And it seems that Stoker is okay with referencing Ellen Terry in his book, but in the end he decided, I better not put the boss's name in there as a joke in a character's name. So and we know that Irving never did this never made it to the stage, and I think everyone I think it's likely that Stoker really wanted Irving to play Dracula on the stage, and that never happened. So
oh yeah. And like the whole relationship between Renfield and Dracula is so much like what Stoker's relationship was with Henry Irving, just like wanting to do everything for him, working so hard and never really getting the attention that he wanted. Yeah.
All right. But I'm battling allergies today, and my nose is just going crazy.
Bless you.
I'm gonna have to do that a few times. Boy, I hate allergies. Anyway, so next they go. Well, to not let him go is Renfield had a good plan. Renfield was put me somewhere else, put me in a straitjacket, chain me up, send me off somewhere else. I'm totally fine with that, which really seems to get it that Renfield knows that he's the one that has to invite Dracula into the house. Now, maybe if Renfield's not there, Dracula gets someone else. I'm sure it's, Dracula's not going to be stopped by that, but Renfield doesn't want to be a part of that plan. And I don't think it's a self-preservation plan. I think it is, he doesn't want to be the one to be involved in him because twice he ties it to Mina's welfare.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to be the cause of her destruction. Yeah.
But Seward makes some good points here about not letting him go. He says he seems so mixed up with the Count in an indexy kind of way that I'm afraid of doing anything wrong by helping his fads. I mean, you still sound like a jerky bad doctor, but anyway. But he's right. He is mixed up with the Count. He tried to tear my throat out with his teeth. All right, that sounds a little, a little exaggerated, but he did. And he called the Count Lord Master. The hard thing has the wool. Oh, Dracula has the wolves and the rats to help him. We got rats here with us today. Okay. So I suppose he isn't above trying to use a respectable lunatic, which is a funny little British, understatement or ironic way of referring to somebody, but which I really like. But Seward's right. Seward's right about this. Like, his guy's clearly connected to the Count. Do we really want to send him out of here in any kind of way it would seem to me that now that I've thought about it this chapter, they're best with him locked up where they know where he is. But of course, they don't know that Dracula's trying to get in to prey on Mina. So it's what they don't know hurts them in the end. So
yeah.
But Seward isn't wrong about he's not really necessarily wrong, I think, even though he's still a terrible, doctor. I'm not going to get over that.
Addicted to morphine,
Yeah. So, well, they they're going to go over here. What else? I found this interesting here. He certainly seemed in earnest. Oh, at the end of that speech, these things in conjunction with the wild work we have in hand help to unnerve a man. That Seward says, and my first reaction is, well, where's the brandy? Because if you're unnerved, that's fine. You have brandy because that's the cure all in this. But Van Helsing says, we can only do as we seem best. What else have we to hope for except the pity of the good God? Which isn't a really hopeful thing to say. That these men are repeatedly very kind of humble in how they hope situations will resolve. And Mina's not. We've had a couple instances of Mina in the text where she's like, we're going to beat this guy. We have all these, brave, men to fight him. Mina's very hopeful. The men are just never hopeful, or it's this humility kind of way of saying, well, I'll leave it in God's hands, but it's not certainly, in that inspiring kind of way.
Yeah, I think there's something that, like, the terror of it, that they all feel. Like, Mina is very, like, recognizes the terror of it, because with Jonathan's journal and everything that she's put together and Lucy's death, like, she knows how horrific this could be if Dracula succeeds. And yeah, her reaction is, no, we're going to do this. We're going to stop him. And all the other men are like, let's do that. But I think they're just so afraid in a way that they're not able to master the fear the way Mina is able to, I think, which I think is a fun thing going into this chapter when they're going to go into, like, the spooky house next door, where he is, in theory.
Which is a total Scooby-Doo moment in the
Oh yeah,
in the thing here too. I'm picturing when they go in that, like, Scooby's behind, Scooby and Shaggy are behind doing their little tiptoe thing. But right before they go in, then Lord Godalming Arthur steps away for a few moments, and he comes back with a little silver whistle. And he says, that old place may be full of rats, and if so, I've got an antidote on call. And all I'm thinking is, well, if you read this for the first time, are you thinking, wait, does he have a special rat whistle? Because that would be really cool, right? Like a little whistle, and then all the rats come, and you could lead them away maybe with your rat whistle or something. It's not that. We'll find out what it is in just a moment. But I like the idea that momentarily you could think, a rat whistle. Wow, they should have them. I mean, I guess it's the Pied Piper kind of thing, right? So we need a special rat whistle, but this whistle is for something else. And they go to the house, keeping the shadow of the trees on the lawn when the moonlight shone out. That's what I'm picturing, Scooby and Shaggy behind them. And the professor's got his bag, and he takes out of his bag. This is the stuff, right? This is the vampire. This is the vampire hunting kit that you see all these things on auction and all, and none of them are ever real. Like, they're real items, but they were put together later. But this is where we get that idea from this novel, this vampire hunting kit, and what would be in it. Before he gets to that, though, he's got this odd metaphor. Though our necks or our windpipes are of the common kind and therefore breakable or crushable, His are not amenable to mere strength. That's a weird way to, explain that, it's odd to use your neck or your windpipe as an example for, by the way, this supervillain is so strong, you can't crush his windpipe.
Right.
Well, I don't expect to, that's the way I'm going to defeat him anyway.
But that's not the ideal way I want to proceed,
So, but that's how Van Helsing thinks. And but this is what we have out of the bag: a little silver crucifix, and that everybody gets one. The wreath of withered garlic blossoms that they put around their neck. So they're going in there, and they've all got these on. It looks like some like Hawaiian leis, like they're all going to a party. He's got a revolver and a knife because there are other enemies too that they could face. And then he's got these small, he's got the portion of the sacred wafer, but before that, these small electric lamps, which you can fasten to your breast. And there was a fascinating thing about that in the Facebook group about, wait a minute, what are these? Now, first it's another moment in the novel where we get this blend of tradition and folklore with the garlic and the cross and the crucifix, and a blend of tradition and technology, modern technology, something that could aid them in fighting Dracula, something Dracula doesn't know about really. But second, what are these lamps? Because everybody's been trying to research this now on our Facebook group. Like, when did they have battery, battery dry cells that you could put in a portable thing and that you could literally wear, hook it on yourself or something? And I haven't been able to find anything. I'm thinking it must be some kind of modified police lantern, those bullseye lanterns that the police have, but they have oil and a wick inside them. And maybe they figured some way to make those electric, but it's portable. So it's got to have a battery. I don't know. Have you ever encountered this?
No, but I remember reading on that post, and I apologize, I can't remember who wrote it.
It was Adam.
Post in the group. Yeah, but there mentioned that there was a time when Henry Irving had these small lights that illuminated his face during a production, which I think is super
actually Tucker mentioned that. Yeah,
and maybe that is literally why this is in the book, in this moment, because Stoker saw Irving using them.
This is in the David Schall, Nina Auerbach edition. Stoker steals an effect from his master. In Henry Irving's lavish production of W.G. Wills's Faust, which opened in 1885, Irving's Mephistopheles illuminated his face by wearing tiny electric lights in his cap. It just doesn't answer the technological question. Is is he wired then, or is it doesn't? Otherwise, you need some kind of battery system, and that's the technological thing we have to have someone figure out and post on the Facebook group or send to me. When were these developed? Little electric lamps that were portable. And was it by the 1890s, or at least 1897 when the book is published? So, I don't know. But that idea, technology, again, Stoker can't help but remind us every single chapter, it seems, there's some kind of very modern technological device that these people are using to combat Dracula. And to get into the house, they have a bunch of skeleton keys. I have doors in our house that you can, and I have a few skeleton keys, and they'll work in some doors and they won't work in some others. And, you can, fool around with it and get them to open. And that's exactly what they do. And Seward, because of his mechanical dexterity as a surgeon, is able to get the right key to open the door. He'd be a good thief. And and then the door creaks open, and this is from Jonathan, which is interesting because it was startlingly like the image conveyed to me in Dr. Seward's diary of the opening of Miss Westenra's tomb. And I like this. This is a kind of, again, this is another meta moment. We were talking about this, I think, in the last chapter or the one before that. That was one before that, about this. We have these moments of, we're reading a written account, and the people in the book are talking about reading the written accounts that we're reading. This kind of meta moments that happen in this novel, that Jonathan wasn't there when they killed Lucy, but he read about it, and we read about it. We read the same thing that Jonathan is talking about, in a sense. So I like these meta moments that happen throughout this book.
Yeah, and I think it's a way of very subtly inserting Mina back into our consciousness too, since she's the one who collated all of this material. Yeah, I find it so interesting that this is from Jonathan's perspective, you know, in a way. Because every time I read it, this chapter, I kind of forget that it's Jonathan who is speaking to us here. Like, he is such a vivid character, I think, to me, like in the beginning of the book. But once he's, you know, overcomes the shock and becomes part of the plot, I feel like he loses a lot of individuality as a character for me. And yeah, I'm not sure why. I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting, because as they've been working at for the last 2 chapters, it's the redemption of Jonathan we've been seeing, you know, that so weak and so torn down. And now we get to see him strong. In each chapter, he does something now that is makes him appear a lot stronger. And especially coming up very soon, he will do something, which I will mention. But they go in, and Van Helsing is, you know, bringing out the Latin, and manus tuus domine, as he crosses himself and passes over the threshold. What's it, you know, and it's into thy hands, you know, I am in your hands, God. But what is fascinating about that is they're also the last words of Jesus. The last thing Christ says on the cross is in manus tuus domine. I think there's a little more that goes after that. Into thy hands, Lord, you know, I am, God, I am. So Jesus is, you know, giving himself up to his, you know, his fate, you know, I am the Messiah. I put it all into God's hands. But at the same time, it is Jesus' death on the cross. And you know, I got it. That's the most hopeful Christian thing is the resurrection, not his death on the cross. So, but that's where Van Helsing is. Van Helsing is that's the quote that he's going to come up with, I think, at this time. Yeah. So, they go in, they light their lamps. I love this effect. Listen to this. The light from the tiny lamps fell in all sorts of odd forms as the rays crossed each other, or the opacity of our bodies through great shadows. I mean, Stoker is suddenly this German expressionist filmmaker here, right? Like that's the exact kind of lighting effect I have seen in, you know, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or Nosferatu or one of these other films. And it's fascinating to think how when we see those kinds of films, we think that kind of thing comes from them. But, you know, that's also an image that can be achieved, you know, through a literary effect that Stoker is doing just by describing what it looks like. But I love that. And then he has that great line, the feeling that there was someone else amongst us. Very, you know, kind of creepy that, you know, maybe there's
classic ghost story.
Yes. One thing I moved over real fast. They're going into this house here, and I forgot to mention they're going in the Carfax, and it's that, I know you refer to it. I frequently refer to it as Carfax Abbey, and it's never referred to in the book as Carfax Abbey.
That's true.
And the Abbey is for Whitby, and they refer to Whitby Abbey in the first, you know, in the few chapters that they're in Whitby, but it's always just Carfax instead of Abbey. And I wonder was it a film? Is it referred to that in maybe the Lugosi film? Like, I wonder, when did people start referring to Carfax as an abbey? Because it's not in the book at all, but I always call it Carfax Abbey.
Yeah, no, I can't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure that started from like from the Dean Balderstein play and then Lugosi. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, is it Carfax Abbey there? So,
I think so.
Patrick wrote that I've never have understood why in an abbey it's so difficult to find the chapel. Yes, because it's not an abbey.
Yep.
It's just a big old mansion that also has a chapel, but we constantly refer to it as Carfax Abbey.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of those fun things, that have become such a part of what we conceive of as definitive Dracula canon that's actually not. Like, like Lugosi saying, I never drink wine, which is not in the book, but everyone knows that, even though it's not really here.
It's a great line. Should be in a book. I'm making a movie, it's in the movie. Or putting it on stage, it's there. Because it's the movie, right? It's not even the stage play, right? Yeah. That's just
I think it's from the movie specifically. Yeah.
So this place, though, feels haunted. As you said, right? Like there's something there. It's like a ghostly place. And it's thick with dust. The way it's described, it really seems as if that's where the opening of that 31 Lugosi, Todd Browning's film, that this is what they're thinking of when they, in Transylvania, when he goes to Dracula's castle. That seems to be the way this all looks. And then this is the moment where Jonathan comes to the fore, and Van Helsing says to him, "You know this place, Jonathan," because he has, found this place for the Count as the solicitor. So he's been there, and then, but there's the line just shortly after that. "So I led the way." Like Jonathan leads the way, and that's an important thing to notice. We've seen him doing investigations behind the scenes, acting like some kind of private investigator. That'll come up again in the next chapter, and he's also leading the way. You would really expect the professor is always in charge here, but even the professor acknowledges that this one in our group actually has more information. It gives Jonathan a moment where he can be in the forefront too. And that, I think, also then answers the question, why is Jonathan even describing this scene? Why is it his journal entry? Because he is the one he's the only one that has met the Count. He's the only one it's not just this house. Jonathan's met the Count. He has stayed with the Count for, a couple months. He's the one with more experience than anyone in this group in dealing with Dracula. So step up, Jonathan. It's time.
And he writes a little bit earlier, like that being in Carfax reminds him of being back in the castle in Transylvania. So there is a really interesting, almost like reliving what that experience was like, but this time at least being in some sort of control of what's happening. That is an interesting thing.
Why don't you read the last half of this paragraph? Start with we were prepared for some unpleasantness to the end of the paragraph. Because I love having you read. Thank you for reading for me.
Oh, thank you. I love reading. "We were prepared for some unpleasantness, for as we were opening the door, a faint, malodorous air seemed to exhale through the gaps, but none of us ever expected such an odor as we encountered. None of the others had met the Count at all at close quarters, and when I had seen him, he was either in the fasting stage of his existence in his rooms, or when he was glutted with fresh blood in a ruined building open to the air. But here the place was small and close, and the long disuse had made the air stagnant and foul. There was an earthy smell, as of some dry miasma, which came through the fouler air. But as to the odor itself, how shall I describe it? It was not alone that it was composed of all the ills of mortality and with a pungent, acrid smell of blood, but it seemed as though corruption had become itself corrupt. Oh, it sickens me to think of it. Every breath exhaled by that monster seemed to have clung to the place and intensified its loathsomeness. Hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, like he
Loathsomeness is a
recognizes
tough word to get
violence.
out.
Sorry, what did you say?
Loathsomeness is always a tough word to get out. But loathsomeness, you have to separate that. Well done.
Yeah.
The smell of this place,
Yeah.
corruption
His smell. Yeah.
and blood. That is a brilliant description on, and well read. A brilliant description for Stoker. It's very Poe-esque to me too.
It is.
That people frequently, think Poe is very gory, and Poe's not gory, but he is very attuned to sensory perception when he describes horrible things. And that passage really strikes me as very Poe-esque in its description. So
yeah.
And then Jonathan says, it reeks the place. And at the end of the next paragraph, after the involuntary shrinking consequent on the first nauseous whiff.
Right.
You can't say whiff without it being funny. But on the first nauseous whiff, we one and all set about our work as though that loathsome place were a garden of roses. The understated, British bravery thing here. Not even really stinky places are going to thwart our heroes. It's all I can think. That's not a brave moment, Jonathan, saying that, even though it stank, we still moved on. But they do, and they find out how many boxes are left. First of all, right to business. Good work, guys. And there were only 29 left out of the 50. So there's 21 boxes that are not there, and there's 29 that they need to take care of. And before we get to those boxes, I'm going to take our mid-break. So I can tell you all about some wonderful things coming up. And of course, the big announcement is that Mark Gatiss will be joining me for a very special Q&A on all things Dracula. And Mark Gatiss was at the Rosenbach last year. Yeah, June 2019. Mark Gatiss was at the Rosenbach. Here we are, standing in the in the front foyer of the Rosenbach. It was a great joy to have him there and to talk to him about Dracula and all kinds of, we talked about Sherlock and all kinds of fun stuff. I even got to show him when he was there. This is him looking at the Conan Doyle manuscript for The Empty House. Look at the smile on his face. He was really excited to see
such joy.
And that was a lot of fun. But he will be returning to the Rosenbach virtually, of course, on September 26th at 3 p.m. EDT. It's a little friendlier time. We decided to do it on the weekend at 3, a friendlier time for people in their European audience that we have. So I was very happy to be able to set it up that way. Mark Gatiss has had a lifelong love of Dracula and all things horror. If you've ever seen an interview with him or seen any of his other horror documentaries that he's made, and we'll talk about Dracula. That's what we'll talk about. And we will field some live questions from you in the audience during the live show. It will last for 1 hour. And Dracula Club members and Rosenbach members, of course, get 50% off the registration price. And Mark Gatiss, as everyone should know, is one of the creators of this year's BBC Dracula adaptation. He wrote the show with his Sherlock partner, Stephen Moffat, and Gatiss also plays the lawyer Renfield in the series. Mark Gatiss has also presented the TV documentary In Search of Dracula, which ran on the BBC, and you can find it online around here, although it's never been officially released. And which in that documentary, he visited the Rosenbach to study Bram Stoker's notes for Dracula. He has also played Dracula in Big Finish's full cast audio drama of the novel. Josh, have you ever listened to that?
I have. It's really good.
2016, great. And then now they've just done a prequel to it called Dracula's Guests and a sequel called Dracula's War. I'm only just a third of the way through Dracula's War right now, but I'm really liking them with Gatiss playing Dracula. And it's not just Mark Gatiss we're bringing to you on Wednesday, October 7th at 6:30 p.m. EDT. Dacre Stoker. It won't be. Will still be EDT. It will still be EDT. Then we will not have changed the clocks from daylight savings. But on October 7th, Dacre Stoker will return for his multimedia presentation, Stoker on Stoker. You can register for that on the Rosenbach website as well. And still, Dracula Club members, Rosenbach members get 50% off the registration price. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow night for Monday Drac Chat at 6:30 p.m. EDT. Each week, one of our Dracufile audience members joins me to talk about all the fabulous and topics and ideas you guys are raising in today's chat, which I really wish I could read during the show because it's like two shows going on at the same time.
I love it.
You guys are all running a show and I'm doing a show with a co-host. So I love that that's the way this whole thing has turned out to be. So we're bringing one of you on, and tomorrow's Dracufile joining me, as I said earlier, will be Patrick Stone. I think Patrick always has really insightful comments in the chat, which I love, but he's also funny, and I like that too, that he's always got some really clever, joke about things. So I'm look forward to adding even more Dracula talk to my life tomorrow with Patrick. I hope you will join. Remember to watch Monday Drac Chat. You need to register for the Zoom link, and it's not the same link for Sundays with Dracula. It is for Rosenbach and Dracula Club members only. It is a perk. It is a benefit that you get for supporting the Rosenbach. There's no live book, free Facebook live stream of it. We don't post it online afterwards. You can only watch it live on Zoom. Back to the show. So they're there. They have discovered that these are the boxes. There's 29 left there. 21 of them are gone. And then this, somewhere, read that, somewhere, looking out from the shadow.
Mm-hmm. I looked too, and for an instant my heart stood still. Somewhere, looking out from the shadow, I seemed to see the highlights of the Count's evil face, the ridge of the nose, the red eyes, the red lips, the awful pallor. It was only for a moment, for as Lord Godalming said, I thought I saw a face, but it was only the shadows, and resumed his inquiry. I turned my lamp in the direction and stepped into the passage. There was no sign of anyone, and as there were no corners, no doors, no aperture of any kind, but only the solid walls of the passage, there could be no hiding place, even for him. I took it that fear had helped imagination and said nothing.
Is the Count there? Or is he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not physically, but he's certainly there psychically in a sense, in this kind of supernatural way that he can do that. It's more than just the kind of, his presence is there because his boxes of earth are there. I think he's watching them.
Oh, yeah. No, in my head canon, like it's after this moment, like when he sees them there and then makes himself mist and disappears, perhaps, like in my version of things, like it's after this that he goes for Mina.
Yeah. And that was my next question is when do you think this is? It's either before or after. He's either been to Mina and now he's returning to look at these guys because he's already, fed, and now he's coming back and he's like, oh, you idiots, I've already fed on your woman, and and he's not going to reveal himself to them. Or it is he's sees them and like, good, you're here. I'm going to get your woman right now.
Yep.
And then he goes,
oh, you think you're going to stop me? I'll show you. Yeah.
So, and he'll reinforce that in a later chapter when they catch up to him, that is what he's doing. Oh, that's I just a great little moment of horror in this, creepiness in this. It's a really well written chapter. It's a short chapter too. It's under 6,000 words. Yeah. It's only 5,600 words. Just like the chapter with Lucy, when they stake Lucy, it's a very short chapter, but it's real powerful. This one too there's two incidents. Well, this incident and then later Mina talking about, you know, her bad dreams at night. But this is the kind of central, you know, plot moment in it. And now we're getting right to the real exciting stuff, which, well, we'll just go through it, because in my memory, and maybe it's movies too, this is like, this chapter is all about rats. There's rats everywhere. Yeah. They're all, and actually that doesn't happen. But I think the effect of this chapter and the way he writes it makes me seem to remember that the rats are much more of a threat than they turn out to be.
Yeah.
And you can't go wrong with this line here. The whole place was becoming alive with rats.
Mm-hmm.
That everything's turning into like every shadow is not a shadow. It's a mass of rats as they're all approaching them. And this is Dracula's power. He has the power over, you know, the meaner things, including rats. And that is what he is doing here. And Adam mentioned in the on the Facebook page that two stories, rats are a big feature too. The judge's house is one of them, and the burial of the rats is another. But I know, especially, I'm pretty certain it's the judge's house that it's really a thing where you get all these rats, and it's part of the story. And now we find out what the whistle is for. Arthur pulls out his little silver whistle, and then the dogs come running in. Smart. I love this. This is a great, you know, really smart on his part to have this at the ready, even though I wish it was a whistle a special rat whistle that called rats. Mm-hmm. It's not. It is to call the dogs to come in. And the number of rats had vastly increased. They seemed to swarm all over the place all at once till the lamplight shining on their moving dark bodies and glittering baleful eyes. I hope the baleful eyes are looking at you here. Made the place look like a bank of earth set with fireflies. What a great image that is, isn't it?
So good.
And then the dogs dashed on. I love it, but the threshold suddenly stopped and snarled, and then simultaneously lifting their noses began to howl in most lugubrious fashion. The rats were multiplying in thousands, and we moved that the dogs are like, whoa, whoa, whoa! You called me to kill a rat, but not like a swarm, like an army of rats. And then Godalming lifts one of the dogs, and he puts him on the floor, and as soon as he's on the floor, he's killing rats. He's just picking them up and shaking them and killing them all. This is a common thing. This was so common in the 19th century to have, you know, get dogs to kill your rat problem, not cats. You got dogs to kill your rats, but it was so common that they wound up making a sport out of it. I mean, this sport existed, long before that. I mean, I think goes back to the Middle Ages, where you literally put a dog in a pen and put the rats in. And it's how many rats can this dog kill in a certain amount of time. And it's never like it's how many rats can a dog kill before the rats kill him. That never happens, because rats will run from the dog. And so this was a big betting thing in places you could find, you know, in London, is dogs doing this. Or you could just go, when you hired the rat catcher, if you have a rat problem in your house, he brings a dog, and, you know, he sets the dog out to kill the rats. So this is a job that some dogs have, and these dogs, as soon as they're put in the mass of rats, they take care of it. So really the only threat of the rats is they all appear. That's it. They're not attacking the guys. They're not, you know, anything like that. They actually just step out of the room and put the dogs in and take care of the rats. So
yeah, like I have to say, like that's one of like the things that really disappoints me about the novel, like is this moment, because it's such a like scary, vivid thing. Like the whole room's alive with these rats, and then it's like, oh, Deus Ex Machina, here's these dogs, it's going to take care of them. Like I think it's kind of a missed opportunity, you know, to really do something even more terrifying. Like it makes me, not to go off on a tangent, but it reminds me a lot of Stephen.
What, on this show? Yeah, no, go ahead.
I know, right?
Digress at will.
But it reminds me so much of Stephen King's Salem's Lot, which, as I'm sure everyone knows, like he constructed as as sort of a modern response to Dracula and seeing where he could fit things in. And in Salem's Lot, the rats are sort of a very big peripheral presence early in the book. And what Stephen King intended in his first draft was that the characters who are hunting the vampire go down to this basement, and the basement is filled with rats, and the rats like descend on one of the characters, and like one goes into his mouth and they eat him alive. And his editor said, that's too gruesome, change it to just he falls on some knives. But like, I wish I for real,
which isn't gruesome at all. No, just a bunch of knives.
Yeah.
Big deal.
But I wish that something like that would have happened here, you know, like pick off Arthur, you know, like as revenge for staking Lucy. Like, I think that would have been such a cool opportunity. But it's okay. You know. He's
really not in the phase where, you know, where major characters are killed. That doesn't start. Yeah. That doesn't happen until much later.
Yeah.
That you wind up with a major character actually dying. And I think authors, in a sense, at some point realize that they have to do that to invest the audience, because the audience knows that, especially in an adventure story, none of the main characters die until maybe the end. It's like a just sacrificial kind of moment that it rarely happens. I'm sure it's happened at times, and I'm sure I could figure one out real quickly, but it's rare that it happens. And but maybe Tolkien does. Maybe it's Tolkien, you know, who brings that in, you know. We just had that Gandalf moment with my kids reading The Lord of the Rings to them, and, you know, they didn't know that was going to happen. Big spoiler for all you people who haven't read Lord of the Rings. Come on, you've had your whole life to do it. My kids they're like 15 and 17, so they haven't read Lord of the Rings yet. Big deal. But if you're an adult, you should have read it already. So anyway, I wish there were more rat involvement here. And what's interesting is that Stoker doesn't use the rat as a symbol of this kind of spreading disease thing, which we see happen in other, you know, vampire stories, and especially the first film adaptation of this novel, Nosferatu, where the rats are very symbolic of when Nosferatu invades the town, the rats do as well, and they bring plague, and the whole vampire epidemic in the town is, they think, is just a plague from the rats.
Yeah.
But Stoker doesn't use that with the rats in here. They're just a tool for Dracula. And in my mind, they were a much bigger player, but they're not really.
Right. Yeah. And as Adam wrote in the chat, you know, he says, I thought that perhaps the rats were there to show that the Count's control is not absolute, which I think is also a very valid and interesting point too. That, you know, he commands the rats, but with this like special, again, that technology thing, this special dog whistle, that threat is neutralized very quickly. So that's also a valid point.
Yeah,
for sure.
And can I say, I've mentioned Adam several times today. We also did a question from him. And Adam, you are so great. You're such a fabulous reader, and your comments and questions that you put on the Facebook and in the chat and all that, I really love. And I have invited Adam to be on Drac Chat, but he can't work it out with his work situation. So if you're wondering why I keep mentioning Adam and all these insightful things and don't bring him on Drac Chat, it's because we haven't been able to work that out. But Adam, you're still invited, and I would love to have you on Drac Chat if you can ever figure that out with work. The dogs take care of the rats, and they're really happy. These dogs are like, yes, this was fun. You know, it's a dog. They killed all these rats, and then they're wagging their tails like, did I do good? They love it. So they're done. And the morning was quickening in the east when we emerged from the front. So this was very late at night when they went in there. It was, you know, shortly before dawn, say like maybe an hour or two before dawn. You know, the sky brightens. This is also described like the times, like, you know, it couldn't have been 5 a.m. that he's writing that journal entry because they were already out. So anyway, but also reminds you this was just a reconnaissance mission. That's all they were doing. They didn't do anything to the boxes of Earth. They didn't it was recon. They were going out to figure out the lay of the land, what's in this, house here, so we can formulate a plan going forward to defeat the Count. And here's the moment where I'm going to share some of the notes. This is the original chap. See, Stoker breaks down in the notes. He does like a chapter by chapter outline of how he's going through all these, how he's going to go through the whole book. And then he completely does whatever he wants. Like everything gets changed. Or he actually wrote all this and then we lost that manuscript. There's clearly scenes that we have lost. When they first go into here, he mentions in his notes more than once about the blood room. And I just can't imagine that he didn't include that. And this is probably where it would have occurred, that they would have gone and they would have found this room colored like blood. Maybe that was the room. And then he changed it in writing it, or he wrote it and then he took it out. But this is the book 3, chapter 5 is where he's at. And we're in Dr. Seward's diary. So he's just got Seward's diary for the whole thing. We've actually had Jonathan's diary instead, which I think makes more sense because Jonathan has dealt with the Count in the past. And it's a visit to the Count. And that's kind of his chapter title, his idea. That's what this chapter is about. It is about a visit to the Count. And just like a few chapters ago, when Lucy was attacked for the last time by Dracula, it was called, and we got her own account of it, it was called The Night of Terror. He has like a chapter title for this in his head that he uses. And this was a visit to the Count, and it is, I'm trying to read the writing here. Yeah, fly patient, which is Renfield, anxious to go, meaning to be let go out of the asylum. We still got that. That was kept. Watched. And then escapes over wall. So this winds up being how they actually go to the house this time. They're not actually just going on a visit. They're actually chasing Renfield over there, which happened earlier in the novel now. Like Stoker has moved that to early in the novel, the couple times that Renfield has escaped. The hunt, and then the house empty. And then searching the Count's house, the blood red room. I want the blood room. Okay. So anybody out there writing Dracula fiction, the blood room, I want the blood room in your book. Yep. So you have to include it. And then I love this right at the end of this, the blood red room, something approaching. Oh, what a great little tease there. Like, what were you thinking? Is it Dracula? And I think it's Dracula. I think Dracula comes back and he's like, what are you doing at my house? And they're like, oh, sorry, we were chasing Renfield over here. That's what the next thing is. But the something approaching idea, I really like that just terse little phrase that he uses to describe this. I have a cat that is begging to get out of this room right now. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure where my cat Mina is at the moment. I expected her to come in before now, but so far she's not.
Jane Pauston is gone. She's downstairs. So that's just a little bit of notes. And I have another little thing I want to share a little bit later in Mina's thing too. I think, what is my note here? I have, this is from Anastasia. I'm sorry. There's another moment from Anastasia. And Anastasia actually writes too, who's great. We've had on Drac Chat. And she writes that at one point, Jonathan Harker refers to Dracula's power over the brute world. And in my mind went, whoa, there's just so much in that. The brute world, B-R-U-T-E, brute world, meaning the animals, or is it more than that, would mean so many things. The distinction between man and animal, which went all topsy-turvy in the 19th century, thanks to Darwin. Dracula seems to be so interestingly tangled up in that, having control over the animal world in a very human-centric, great chain of being kind of way, except, of course, Dracula himself doesn't fit neatly in the human category. But it also recalls to me the Victorian idea of power and control over the brute, physical, material world through science and technology, which in this line is attributed to Dracula, the brute, uncivilized savage. So I look forward to seeing what you can ferret out of that, blah, blah, blah. That's interesting. And I hadn't focused on that line. I didn't send that to you earlier to give you a look at that. She sent it to me last night. Anastasia often sends me a question like late at night, like before.
Awesome.
So she's reading the book then, I imagine. And I love them, and I'm glad we can get to them. But that line that, he is just trying to find the exact moment in that chapter. It is... Yeah, it's just after this. The morning was quickening in the east. They've come out, and Van Helsing says, the first step has been accomplished with bringing thereinto our most sweet Madam Mina, or troubling her waking or sleeping thoughts with sight. You're wrong, dude. Actually, she's not safe. But one lesson, too, we have learned that the brute beasts, which are to the Count's command, are yet themselves not amenable to his spiritual power. So Van Helsing sees this as these brute beasts. He might be able to control them, but they don't have any greater powers than it's just a rat. And all we got to do is set some dogs on them, and we're safe. Say that to Berserker. But this idea that Dracula has power over the brute world, that's an interesting choice of words, I think. I think Anastasia's right. I think there's more in that choice coming out of Stoker's head than it's not just rats. What do you think, Josh?
No, I think there's something very much in the air at the time this and other books were written in the Victorian age, of that struggle between like trying to control the baser impulses of humans so that they're not like animals. I mean, that, and how science and technology fits into that. I mean, that's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like that is what that book is all about. Like, so I think that's certainly something that is in the air in Dracula as well. Of, is this?
Look, I still got a skull. Oops,
oh, yay!
There you go. Still one in there.
Like, is this what is the Count? Like, is he human who is given into animal instincts, and that's what we're fighting against because we're proper Victorian folks? I think that's definitely something that's in the air here.
It is. It's so. I mean, it's because it is such an anxiety. The Darwin's scientific theories that are facts that of evolution and animals and our connections, that in the end that we're just animals, and how this causes such great anxiety
Horror.
In the 19th century, and horror that continues today. But then especially, I mean, this is because it's brand new, and I think that anxiety is in this novel, and to place then Dracula as the monster who can control the animal world,
and who has a human face.
Yeah, because and she's right that he's not human himself, and that point gets made, or that he may have been human. Mina will really make this point, actually, never the man. But as a monster, he's removed from humanity, and yet, while we are threatened by, or the people at the time are threatened by and anxious over our connection to the animal world, Dracula's just like, yeah, I'm just going to control it. And that's so scary for this time. I love that connection. And then her second point about the brute world, meaning, also representing our ability to control things, like our ability to control technology and to harness the physical elements of the universe, or of our world at least, into technology to help us, which Dracula can't do, or doesn't understand enough to do. There's a great difference in there that is well worth pursuing and thinking about. He's connected to the animal. He's connected to that brute animal world, we're connecting ourselves more to this brute physical world in trying to control the elements. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a great, way to pursue this. Whoops, spilling all over the place here.
Oh no.
Just little drips. We're good. Oh, I want to add a little more of my hearing cherry, because you just can't make a drink sweet enough. And the look of this is so attuned to this novel, right? This kind of thick, viscous red liquid.
Perfect.
It's perfect. Cheers to everyone. Whoops. Cheers.
Cheers.
Is your coffee cold by now?
It is, but I don't mind.
You don't mind drinking it cold? Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I'm actually using a different pipe today. You may notice I'm using my Chacon with the red, and it's got little red highlights in the wood here. I'm not sure, they don't really come off in the camera. Those little red highlights in the wood as well. But for me, this is always my vampire pipe anyway. And it's a longer stem. And I thought with the Scolamons, I was thinking more wizards. I have some other wizardy kind of pipes, but you can't really do a whole wizard pipe while you're doing the show. I'm not even able to hold a wizard pipe. But I have another long church warden here that I could do too, that really dips way down. But I thought I would start with my vampire pipe, the Chacon. So Belle Epoque is its name, which, it would be better if it was the fin de siècle. So, all righty. Van Helsing, and knowing, as you do as a second reader, that Mina was attacked by Dracula while they were all doing this, makes these congratulatory comments by Van Helsing sound all the worse, Yeah. That we were able to keep Mina safe by doing this, and absolutely you were not. And then they returned to the asylum. Van Helsing also mentions this chess game, which we played for the stake of human soul. That's a hard line to cut when you're doing this show live, I'm sure. Did you include that? Do you remember?
I did not.
That's a great line.
It is a great line. No, there's like a 3-hour solo version of Dracula I'd love to do one day, because there's just so much great stuff.
All righty, everyone. You heard that. He wants to do a 3-hour Dracula solo show. You need to start writing to me and Josh to say we can make that happen in Philadelphia. I think you may have an audience that wants to see that. But they get back to the asylum. The house was silent when we got back, save for some poor creature who was screaming away in one of the distant wards, and a low moaning sound from Renfield's room. The poor wretch was doubtless torturing himself after the manner of the insane, with needless thoughts of pain.
Which I think is another clue, right? Like that Dracula's been to Mina, they don't notice.
I love this ambiance of the lunatic asylum, that what you're going to hear, people screaming from other parts of the place as you're trying to relax. I mean, earlier it was last chapter before that, like when Mina's making the tea for them and Seward's like, it was such a homey feeling now that Mina's here to make us all tea. But the people are screaming in pain, in anguish while they're all there. So, that's what's happening in this place. And then Jonathan goes in, he finds Mina asleep. She looks paler than usual. So, she was clearly, the attack has happened. And
softly.
I just, for a first-time reader, I think Stoker, in the next passage from Mina a little later, that you really know that it's happening. But this is the first step into letting the reader know that Mina is being preyed upon by Dracula. And Jonathan's whole response is, I'm just thankful she's left out of our future work. It's too great a strain for a woman to bear, really? Because actually she's always not broken down over. You broke down, Jonathan.
Right. You had a complete mental collapse.
Complete brain fever. he got the Victorian brain fever when he was faced with it. Mina doesn't get that. And it just makes me, what I mean, Stoker has to be aware of this. It's like, I recognize that he's still far too, not nearly progressive enough for us and his outlook of life, and for his characters, for a woman to have that much power. But he absolutely has to be aware that he has a character here saying women can't handle it, and he himself as a man couldn't handle it. Like,
Yeah.
he has to recognize that's what he's portraying there for his readers to notice as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then John says there may be things which would frighten her to hear, and yet to conceal them from her might be worse than to tell her, if once she suspected that there was any concealment. So he has some reluctance. He has some, he wishes he could be completely honest with her.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, he's kind of, I don't know, I guess almost in a sense agreeing with the other men that, like, yeah, we should just not, tell you. So he wants to include Mina, but he's been either convinced, or he's just trying to convince himself that she needs to be kept in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
And you're all wrong. You should have told her. So. And then he mentions at the very end that he's going to look up Thomas Snelling today. And long ago in this novel, in the Whitby chapters, that Thomas Snelling is one of the people in the company that were carrying the carts of earth to Carfax. So, and he's going to continue his investigations into where these carts of where these boxes of earth were delivered to. So we jump to Seward's diary, and he wakes, and they all get up towards noon. So they all slept through the morning after being up all night. The professor wants to visit Renfield. Is that what's going on here? Yes.
Yeah.
The professor wants to visit Renfield, and may I be with you? I visit him this morning. I'm always trying to figure out, like, what's going on here when I try to read, like, his phrases, because they're so convoluted, and I have to stop and figure it out. He said to it's another meta moment. It's another, because he said to Madam Mina, as I see in your diary of yesterday, that he had once such a belief, and that he is Seward, or Van Helsing is mentioning something he's read that we've already read. He's referring to the same document that we've read. Another mention that, this record and these moments are all being compiled live as we're reading it. They're putting them all together right now.
And that they're sharing with each other too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Van Helsing goes to visit him, and this time though he shuns him. I mean, Renfield was very courteous, also trying to be released. So he didn't want to appear, too savagely, insane the last time he met Van Helsing. But here he's just, I know you well enough. You are the old fool, Van Helsing. I wish you would take yourself and your idiotic brain theories somewhere else. Damn all thick-headed Dutchmen. So and had I not done the school amounts, there would have been a drink called the thick-headed Dutchman. So that was going to be the drink today, but I had to go with the school amounts, which is really good. I'm having the second one now, and it's excellent.
Nice.
So the rum and the ginger beer is often known as a I made my second one. I didn't add any of the ginger beer. I'm drinking like rum. A dark and stormy drink, called dark and stormy, with rum, the spice rum, especially the Kraken, and the ginger beer, and lime is a dark and stormy. So in a way, my School of Mons is a kind of a variation of that. There, I added some ginger beer, and it needed it. That's good. Anyway. So he shuns Van Helsing this time. And why would he shun him? Well, of course, because you all failed me. I tried to prevent something, and you all turned away from it.
Yeah.
He's right, and angry at them that they wouldn't listen to him. But you are eating flies and spiders, Renfield. So it's like I understand why they're not going to listen to you, but it's this frustrating thing for him to actually be insane and have this bizarre outlook on life and the world and how you have to consume life to survive, and then also having very cogent ideas that will help people, but nobody's going to listen to them now. So
Yeah, like I think it's a really Renfield's a very interesting comment on mental illness and the treatment of it in Victorian times, I think. Because, yeah, there's that thing of like, he has the information. Like, Renfield has all the information that they need to succeed if they would listen to him, but they dismiss him because he's crazy. And he might be crazy, but that doesn't mean that he isn't a human being and doesn't have knowledge that they need and that he doesn't want to help them,
yeah.
perhaps. Yeah.
And it's a tragedy. It winds up being the tragedy of Renfield.
Yes.
So, maybe if they had listened to him once, that would have helped him. He would have, and we'll see what happens to him later in the next chapter or two chapters from now, when we find out his fate for trying to help, for being torn between trying to help and also serving the master, which he also wants to do. But come on, if you're going to be like trapped in an asylum with Seward as your doctor, or serve the master, dude, I'm picking the master any day of the week.
Yeah.
So Van Helsing and Seward now go on this, oh, so good that Mina is not involved in this, and she's so safe, and oh boy, it would have infallibly wrecked her if she had, experienced anything we've experienced. So another, like, Stoker's really banging the drum that the men are constantly talking about how safe Mina is and how it's such a good thing that she's not involved in this. So it's interesting that I think there's actually two ways to look at that. He's either pointing out their folly or it's just their bad luck. It could be either. For me, it's their folly because they had the opportunity to listen to her and chose not to. But it could be a way of just pointing at his way of pointing out that it's just, boy, they tried so hard to keep this woman of theirs safe and they couldn't do it. It's not their fault. They just, it's their fault.
But yeah, that their intent is to save her and keep her safe. And they do that by leaving her alone, in an asylum.
In an asylum.
Yeah.
That includes a patient who is connected with Dracula.
Yeah.
In some weird way that they don't understand. So, yeah. So this is a mistake on their part. So, all right. Now we're going to get Mina's account of what has been happening to her since they've left her out of their own investigations. We need to find out what's going on with Mina. And I'm going to have you read some of this, but not just yet. Her journal opens up. It is strange to me to be kept in the dark as I am today. After Jonathan's full confidence for so many years, to see him manifestly avoid certain matters and those most vital of all. And then she says a little bit at the end of the paragraph, I suppose it must have distressed him even more than it did me to visit the house. They all agreed that it was best that I should not be drawn further into this. Oh, no, she's referring to distressed him knowing that he couldn't tell her. They all agreed that it was best that I should not be drawn further into this awful work. And I acquiesced. So if you want to know what acquiesced means, look it up. It's to accept something reluctantly, but without protest. So Mina's clearly letting us know that she doesn't agree with them, but she's going to accept their decision reluctantly. And now she's crying like a silly fool, which I know comes from my husband's great love and from the good wishes of all those other strong men. No, it comes from the fact that half the blood in your body was just sucked out. and that is why you're weakening now, and she doesn't quite understand that. So,
and I love the sentence right before that, like, but to think that he keeps anything from me. I think it's an interesting little moment here that, like, this supernatural blood being drank by Dracula's side, like that this is causing problems in their marriage. That, you know, she says like his full confidence for so many years, and now he's not telling her things, and this is really causing a fracture between them, that there's this silence, these things that
especially from the person in your relationship, Mina, who was willing to accept the fact that I'm not going to read your journal. Like I'm not going to push you for the things that destroyed your mind. And at the same time, I'm going to be the protector of that memory in that journal until like she has done so much for him.
Everything. Yeah.
And now he's not sharing. So she recognizes in him that disturbs him. So like, it's not completely his fault. Like he seems to want to, but refuses to. And I think it's Van Helsing. Van Helsing has convinced him that you can't let women into this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I don't agree with you, obviously, of course, Van Helsing in that, but he's the old man in the group. He's the guy from a time past. And clearly, if they're all young, and these are the young people. They're all in their 20s. And Van Helsing is the old man guiding them. He's clearly from a time before there was a new woman, before there was a woman who could assert her own rights and be powerful and contribute along with these men in this. And they're listening to him instead of being, you know, instead of listening to or Jonathan at least, instead of listening to what he already knows, is that he should be honest with Mina and tell her everything. Mina is, so she's weak. She says, last night I went to bed when the men had gone simply because they told me to. She's like making no bones about it. Like, they told me to go to bed, so I went to bed. Like I acquiesced. She doesn't want to go to bed, but she's okay. I'll go to bed. And then she says, it seems like a horrible tragedy. This whole situation, everything that's going on, it's like a horrible tragedy with fate pressing on relentlessly to some destined end. Very kind of prophetic comment for her. And she had been crying twice in the morning. I, who never cried on my own account, never, like suddenly she's very weepy and she can't figure it out. And we know what it is. And it is, I'm trying to like, how much am I going to have you read? Let's just go through this paragraph, then I'll have you read the next one. Because what she hears during the night, she describes this, and I love it. It's all very sensory, and it's all very auditory. She hears barking of dogs, and that's obviously the men with the dogs. So, that's the clue. That's when, if the barking of the dogs is, now they could be just out there barking outside the house because they're nearby. So anyway, but she hears barking of the dogs and a lot of queer sounds, like praying on a very tumultuous scale from Mr. Renfield's room. So Renfield is praying or pleading. Who's he praying to? Is he praying to like, is it a plea to Dracula? Like, please don't, come in. Please don't make me invite you in, kind of thing. And then there was silence.
It's interesting because in my edition, it says braying, not praying, from Renfield's room.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that a typo? I don't know.
No.
That's going to be too much to I have praying. Braying is very different than praying.
Yeah. Both are very interesting.
Yeah, braying is just, kind of like donkey-like, making loud noises, which is the opposite of praying, which would be a pleading sound. What edition do you have?
I have, so this is the old Barnes and Noble edition.
I wonder if that, somebody can tell me. Mine says praying for somebody. I don't know. I'm gonna look that up and find out. But in any case, she hears clearly sounds from Renfield's room that we know now, after having read, not if this is the first time, you've only read up to this chapter. Dracula is saying, "Let me in," and he's letting him in, and No, just go for it. Just read from All Was Dark and Silent, and
Sure.
at some point I'll stop. I think to read that paragraph and the next is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Gotcha.
I might stop you at one point.
Yeah, stop me anytime you want.
And then we
All right,
go
let's
on.
go.
But go ahead.
All was dark and silent, the black shadows thrown by the moonlight seeming full of a silent mystery of their own. Not a thing seemed to be stirring, but all to be grim and fixed as death or fate, so that a thin streak of white mist that crept with almost imperceptible slowness across the grass towards the house seemed to have a sentience and a vitality of its own. I think that the digression of my thoughts must have done me good, for when I got back to bed, I found a lethargy creeping over me. I lay a while, but could not quite sleep, so I got out and looked out of the window again. The mist was spreading and was now close up to the house, so that I could see it lying thick against the wall as though it were stealing up to the windows. The poor man was more loud than ever, and though I could not distinguish a word he said, I could in some way recognize in his tone some passionate entreaty on his part. Then there was the sound of a struggle, and I knew that the attendants were dealing with him. I was so frightened that I crept into bed and pulled the clothes over my head, putting my fingers in my ears. I was not then a bit sleepy, at least so I thought, but I must have fallen asleep, for except dreams, I do not remember anything until the morning when Jonathan woke me. I think that it took me an effort and a little time to realize where I was, and that it was Jonathan who was bending over me. My dream was very peculiar and was almost typical of the way that waking thoughts become merged in or continued in dreams.
All right, we'll stop for a second, then I'll have you read the next paragraph. Because it's just, well, the thin streak of white mist that crept across the grass towards the house seemed to have a sentience and vitality of its own. And then I think we've had this moment where in the notes it seems like Dracula can create a mist, and what Van Helsing said in the last chapter, that he can create a mist and kind of come in it. So I think there's always a confusion over whether Dracula is actually the mist, like he can dematerialize into a mist-like substance, or he creates a mist that he's just kind of in, that's kind of disguising him, almost like a fog. But the mist seems to have a sentience and a vitality of its own, makes me kind of think that Dracula is actually the mist, that he has materialized into a mist. It's spreading up close to the house, and then it overcomes it. And that's when she hears the passionate entreaty from Renfield. So I think that's the moment where Dracula says, Renfield, let me in. And Renfield has to invite him in. That is a rule that Stoker seems to abide by, that the Van Helsing has said so. And then it's true that vampires have to be invited in. So that is Renfield's job, is to invite Dracula into this house. And I want to comment on her lethargy that she describes there, and then she'll say it again later, that when she wakes up, she's just kind of actually it's the beginning of the second paragraph, but I'll hit it now and then we'll read it. This, she says it was powerless to act. My feet, my hands, my brain were weighted, and then she's also very lethargic during the day, and she's not having. And there's a moment in the notes that I'm going to share with you right now that is it's kind of a redescription of the vampire powers that Stoker goes through. He has these lists of vampire powers and limitations, and this is another one. And it's like, it just goes through fog by instinct, at zoo rage of lion, an eagle, things like that that we've already hit. And there's just one line on this that that I find really fascinating. Well, actually, the influence over rats is here too, right here. Influence over rats. That, you know, this is something that he has repeated more than once in the notes, and clearly he's brought it into the novel. But here it is, the power. It's right here. Power of creating evil thoughts and destroying will. And it's one thing to create evil thoughts in somebody, like I have that power, but to destroy your will, to make you powerless, I think, really readily attribute to a kind of mesmeric power. Like, and we see this a lot. We see it in Dracula movies all the time, that they encounter Dracula and he looks at you and the eyes pierce into you and you're kind of paralyzed, and you know, and he's, you know, and he can make you do anything he wants, that you are hypnotized by Dracula. But this is even bigger. That is because the way it's portrayed in this novel, he can destroy Mina's will before he's even there. She's already feeling lethargic and powerless before he even enters the room. And that's clearly something that he's thinking about, that is a power of him, of a vampire. And then in working it out in the book, he has Dracula have this power to do this without even being there. Before he even meets you, he can take away your will, which must mean that he has this great psychic power that he can do, that he can project that influence upon people before he's even in their physical presence.
Which goes a long way to explaining a bit of Renfield too. Yeah.
It absolutely goes to Renfield and the way he has been exhibiting his attachment to Dracula but he does it before he even meets him. Now,
I worship you long and afar off.
Yeah. Renfield already has that philosophy in life, that, you know, the power of getting life by consuming other lives. So he already has a vampiric philosophy to his madness. So Dracula comes along and it's like, yeah, of course he's going to mesh with him. But it happens psychically beforehand. And Dracula clearly has the power to destroy your will, and according to the text, before he's even in your physical presence. Read that next paragraph. It's a great paragraph. Mina describing what happens.
Yep. I thought that I was asleep and waiting for Jonathan to come back. I was very anxious about him, and I was powerless to act. My feet and my hands and my brain were weighted so that nothing could proceed at the usual pace. And so I slept uneasily and thought. And then it began to dawn upon me that the air was heavy and dank and cold. I put back the clothes from my face and found to my surprise that all was dim around me. The gaslight, which I had left lit for Jonathan, but turned down, came only like a tiny red spark through the fog, which had evidently grown thicker and poured into the room. Then it occurred to me that I had shut the window before I had come to bed. I would have got out to make certain on the point, but some leaden lethargy seemed to chain my limbs and even my will. I lay still and endured. That was all. I closed my eyes, but could still see through my eyelids. It is wonderful what tricks our dreams play us and how conveniently we can imagine. The mist grew thicker and thicker, and I could see now how it came in, for I could see it like smoke, or with the white energy of boiling water pouring in, not through the window, but through the joinings of the door. It got thicker and thicker, till it seemed as if it became concentrated into a sort of pillar of cloud in the room, through the top of which I could see the light of the gas shining like a red eye. Things began to whirl through my brain just as the cloudy column was now whirling in the room, and though it came, and through it came all the scriptural words, a pillar of cloud by day and of fire by night. Was it indeed such spiritual guidance that was coming to me in my sleep? But the pillar was composed of both the day and the night guiding, for the fire was in the red eye, which at the thought got a new fascination for me, till as I looked the fire divided, and seemed to shine on me through the fog like two red eyes, such as Lucy told me of in her momentary mental wandering when, on the cliff, the dying sunlight struck the windows of St. Mary's Church. Suddenly, the horror burst upon me that it was thus that Jonathan had seen those awful women growing into reality through the whirling mist in the moonlight, and in my dreams I must have fainted, for all became black darkness. The last conscious effort which imagination made was to show me a livid white face bending over me out of the mist. I must be careful of such dreams, for they would unseat one's reason if there was too much of them. I would get Dr. Von Helsing or Dr. Seward to prescribe something for me which would make me sleep, only that I fear to alarm them. Such a dream at the present time would become woven into their fears for me. Tonight I shall strive hard to sleep naturally. If I do not, I shall tomorrow night get them to give me a dose of chloral. That cannot hurt me for once, and it will give me a good night's sleep. Last night tired me more than if I had not slept at all.
Good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What a great, powerful moment in the novel that Stoker's put in there. And it's fascinating because, you know, we as readers, even the first time readers, you know, they're like, oh my God, Dracula is visiting her right now. And that's what's going on. And yet he doesn't say that because it's her perspective. It is just this weird, mysterious thing that is happening to her. And we did get Lucy's account of what it was like to be first attacked, and she has that out-of-body experience, and she's like, my body seemed like it was above everything, and then I could look out on the world and then kind of, you know, come back into it. And this is what Mina's is like, and it's really, for her, it's really focused on what's actually going on around her at first, the mist coming in, that she's weighted down, and then this tiny spark through the fog, which is the gaslight, and that kind of becomes, it kind of breaks apart, and it's his two red eyes. Mm-hmm. Look, it was great.
Yeah.
You know, Stoker's got he's got the power to really write these powerful scenes. I mean, he's got the talent to write these powerful scenes that happen in this, and and she recognizes that it was thus that Jonathan had seen those awful women growing into reality through the whirling mist and the moonlight. But it's still a dream for her. Is that, I mean, and then she says, and she sees a livid white face bending over me out of the mist. We get that in several vampire Dracula films. With Lugosi, we get it with Christopher Lee. But it's such a dream again that, is it her reluctance or her natural reluctance to admit that I'm being preyed upon by a vampire? Because she recognizes there's a connection here, right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think she's aware of what this is, but she doesn't want to bring it to the men's attention. Right. And I think it's so interesting because this scene here is really the twin and the echo of Jonathan with the weird sisters back in the castle, like with the same sexuality to it. Like when she, where is it? When she says, like, I lay still and endured. That was all. I closed my eyes, but could still see through my eyelids. Like, it's very like the looking out from under my eyelashes that Jonathan says. And like with the old awful saying, like, oh, for women back then, like, oh, close your eyes and think of England.
Yeah.
Like I think she's
enduring, what's the experience she's going through. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, for me, like, I think this is just as vivid and strong and horrifying as Jonathan with the weird sisters, if not more so. Yeah.
Yeah, because when Jonathan describes in his journal entry later, it is in full recognition of this is what's going on. Like these women are coming to me and I'm kind of half wanting them and I'm also horrified by them. But Mina is just like, oh, I'm having a bad dream with eyes and there's a livid face, but she doesn't describe it in any way as actually, that she wants this. There's no desire in her as there is with Jonathan.
Yes.
And this is pure attack. And for all it's interesting that when some adaptations kind of really give her some adaptation that was that 1968 TV adaptation with Denholm Elliott as Dracula, where they all blame Mina for being preyed, like, oh, it's your fault. And this happens more than, than is that people might realize, that people blame Mina for the attack, which is the same thing as blaming a woman for being raped. Like, oh, you wanted it in some way. But that is such a, putting other things onto this text, because she does not. This is not, unlike Jonathan, she does not want this to happen to her.
Yeah, and Loki's very perceptive, and Elizabeth in the chat, like that it's the shame of an assault victim, like, which I think is absolutely dead on correct. Yeah.
That is what we are actually getting here in the text.
Yep.
And let's remember too that this is Stoker writing this text, who is aware of the difference between Mina and Jonathan in being preyed upon, and he does not. Now he may have other factors weighing in too, that like, oh, a woman's not going to be thinking of sex being attacked because women shouldn't think of that kind of thing. I get that he could also have those ideas in his head, but what we're presented with here is Mina is being attacked. She is in no way wanting this attack. Now, you can, of course, make a film like Coppola's, Dracula, where, of course, she wants the big, because it's Gary Oldman and he's hot, and we get a big backstory where she's just a reincarnation of his former love anyway, and that kind of. But in a sense, it's like, let's create a backstory to justify my rape of you.
Just soften it, yeah.
So but it's real in that movie, and that's the way the story plays out. And if you're going to do that story, that's the story you're doing. But this story itself is Mina being preyed upon by Dracula, by this monster, and this is the way it happens. And
feeling like she can't talk about it.
Yeah. So we get the next day. 10 p.m. to October. It's clearly when she's writing her journal entry, because last night I slept but did not dream. I must have slept soundly, for I was not waked by Jonathan coming to bed. I don't understand. Does that mean that she wasn't preyed upon? Because if she didn't have bad dreams, I think maybe she gets a night off of being Dracula's, feeding.
Yeah, maybe.
But then she also spent all yesterday trying to read, lying down, dozing. She's still lethargic. Now, clearly you're lethargic now because you've lost half of your blood. Clearly, that's what's happening. And Renfield asked to see her, and she goes, and she just says, he was very gentle. And when I came away, he kissed my hand and bade God bless me. So Renfield recognizes that she has now been, preyed upon by the Count. And there's a weird thing going on with Renfield, because earlier on he's very jealous of the Carters who are carrying Dracula away, and like he wants Dracula for himself. Now that he's actually faced with a situation here where he's preying upon a woman who in Renfield's mind is just like, he's making her the vampire and not me. And but he's not jealous of her. He still feels great sympathy for her, which is nice of him. If you consider the perverted thought that like he just wants to be a vampire, and Dracula won't make me a vampire. Could you please make me a vampire? This is like what we do in the shadows, The familiars are like, please, I've been serving you for years. Why won't you make me a vampire? That's all Renfield wants. And yet that is what he wants. But he's still, very empathizing with Mina and what she has.
Because he chooses it and she is not.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. Um, and she's crying. She says, "This is a new weakness of which I must be careful. Jonathan would be miserable if he knew I'd been crying." Um, really played up in the text in this kind of, gendered way where I'm crying, I'm being a woman, and it's not that, and it's
Mm-hmm.
easy, very, I think it'd be easy for people, in 1897 reading this novel to say, like, it's not because you're a woman, that's because you're being preyed upon, and clearly Jonathan was worse than you are. So the but then after dinner they sent me to bed and all went off to smoke together. So now I'm all for them all going off to smoke together, although I would have invited Mina to smoke with us. So my wife's a smoker too. So I never, like, why would you ever exclude the women from smoking? That is some of the best conversation that's going to happen, is when you're all off smoking together. So am I advocating smoking? Probably, but you know, but that's me as a smoker. So she's weak. They sent her to bed, and she even gets a sleeping draft this time. I might want it. Here comes sleep. Good night. The chapter ends.
And one thing, like, I love the language she uses, for as sleep begins to flirt with me, a new fear comes. Like, I just love that turn of phrase. So cool. Yeah.
Well done. Figuring I read right over that. Didn't even see that. So, all righty, Dracuphiles. Thank you all for tuning in today. I'll post this recording on our website. So if that's how you're watching it right now, thank you for watching all this. Thank you for getting to the very end. Thank you for not giving up at like halfway through or like, oh, that's enough. You stuck to the end. So if you're watching this, thank you for sticking to the end. We have a Sundays with Dracula Facebook group where we can continue the conversation. Look us up on Facebook and join in that conversation. It really informs the things we're doing on the show, as evidenced by today. I am always available to answer your questions via email. Of course, I've talked about a couple of those email questions today that we had. Don't forget to join me for tomorrow night for Monday Drac Chat, when Dracuphile Patrick Stone, Patrick, I can't wait to have you, will be on the show. Remember to register for Drac Chat ahead of time. It is for members, Rosenbach members, and Dracula Club only. You can only watch it on Zoom as it airs at 6:30 p.m. EDT. No reposts after the airing. If you're looking for more virtual engagement, head on over to the Rosenbach website. Check out the other virtual engagements, all those great courses we have. If you register for one of those courses, or if you register for Mark Gatiss on September 26th at 3 p.m. EDT, I would be more grateful than one of those dogs who got to go and feast on all those rats. Those dogs were very happy dogs in this chapter. Josh, thank you for being here today.
Thank you all so much. This is a blast as always.
Awesome. Great. Well, join us next week on Sundays with Dracula for Chapter 20, when Jonathan Harker investigates. He becomes a PI again, and we get more working class blokes who call their betters governor. Hey, governor, let me tell you what's going on. And Renfield also expostulates on his theories of life. I'm two scolomances in here, so the words are not coming trippingly off my tongue. Once again, will be played out by Tucker Christine's pleated gazelle song, Storm into Whitby. Farewell, everyone. And in the words of our friend Dracula, go safely and leave something of the happiness you bring. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.